Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me in this webinar. And I really appreciate your zeal and just desire to be able to make human suffering less. And especially as an international student, this comes in at a big cost because you know how difficult and challenging it would be to be able to achieve your goal. But hopefully this webinar will be helpful in enlightening you in your pursuit to do medicine in the US. So a little bit about myself. So I'm Emmanuel, and I grew up in Zimbabwe. I did my high school there and came to the US to attend Oberlin College in Ohio. I mean, everyone used to tell me how difficult it is to get into medical school. So I knew when I was coming in that this would be a task that I need to put myself to. But then even through it all, I just continue to be determined that this is the goal that I've set myself to, and I can still do it. So I just want you, even as we're going through this webinar, to have just an open mind, and I'll be sharing my experiences along the way. But overall, I just want you to get a big picture of what it entails to be able to study medicine in the US. It's not that easy, but then it's not impossible either. Okay, so we'll start off with just a general overview. And all right, so this is the outline, and I'll start off with the overview of the US health medical education system. That way you'll be able to appreciate how medicine falls in line with, and the differences especially with other medical programs around the world. And then we'll talk about the academic requirements and some of the extracurriculars that you will probably definitely need to add to your resume. And then I'll also talk about the application process as well as issues regarding funding for medical education. Okay. All right, so the overview, medicine in the US. This is something that everyone is probably looking forward to, but let's start by just talking about the major differences between a medical degree in the US as well as abroad. So most places have students going to medical school right after high school. But then in the US is totally different. You have to do an undergraduate first, and because medicine is a postgraduate degree. And after you finish during your high school, then you apply for college. After college, then medical school. Then after medical school, then residency, then fellowship, then you'll be able to practice medicine. So there are basically three, I call them three pathways. You can do the MD, which is a doctorate in medicine, which is what I did. Or you can do MD, PhD, which is more like a physician scientist, where you do maybe 2 years of regular medicine. You then leave to go and do your PhD, then come back and finish the clinical aspects of your MD. Then you start doing residency like everybody else. And then the DO, or doctor of osteopathy, slightly different because you end up doing more like manipulative medicine. It's also a pathway to be able to practice in the US. I don't know about other countries, but definitely here it's possible. And then in terms of the timeline, I think I'd mentioned that you start off as a pre-med or just your undergraduate degree. Then that's for 4 years in general. And then you go to medical school for about 4 years. Then residence is anywhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on what specialty you're doing. And I just managed to get this information online about the compensation of different subspecialties in medicine. This is from 2020 and from Medscape. And you can tell that it's, you don't live like a pauper, you don't live poor in the US as a physician, but then it comes at a cost, as you will be able to appreciate as we go on during this webinar. So like pediatrics is 3 years, orthopedics is, I think, 5 years, and then some people do a fellowship. And I'm doing radiology, and it's a total of 5 years plus 1 year of fellowship, which is 6 years. This is after you finish your degree of medicine. So I did high school, then I came here, did 4 years of pre-med and my bachelor's. Then I did about 4 or so years of medicine. Then now I'm in my 4th year of radiology. So I'm left with 2 more years, which just gets you to appreciate that it's a long road and you just need to be prepared for that. and you can you can just read for yourself. This is something that information that I can easily Google, so I won't probably go in too much into specifics. So how do you prepare for your journey? I believe that you always have to begin with the end in mind, right? So let's go. So the pre-med requirements. When people hear about pre-med, they think it's like a degree. It's not a degree in pre-med. You just do the pre-med requirements, which are a year of biology, 2 years of chemistry, 1 year of physics, and now I think most places require a semester of biochemistry and then 1 year of intensive writing or English. So those are the requirements that you need to be able to apply and get accepted into medical school. And so then the other question is, oh, so what should I major in? Should I be biochemistry or should I be sociology? It really depends on what you're interested in. And my recommendation always is, as an international student, you have to think about what are you good at and what are you going to excel? Because when you compare, say, for instance, with NYU, that's the average GPA, the median, not the average. So the median GPA was 3.96 for the 2018 to 2019 cycle. That's very high. Although the range is like from 3.47 to 4.0, but most of the people are at 3.9. When I applied to medical school, I think I had a 3.90 for my GPA, which was, it was acceptable at that point. And then just make sure, especially now, as I regard the pre-med requirements, some people, you come in with different backgrounds from high school. Don't just go in and say, I'm a ninja, I did very well in high school, I'm just gonna come in and take the higher level chemistry classes and I'm gonna be great. Because when you do that, you still want to be able to ease into the American culture and the American medical education system. So take the required classes. Don't just easily test out, because that way you ease into the system and you do very well as well. Okay. All right. So the GPA addressed that, and you can major in anything really. But also remember that as an international student, you're also on a visa, and if your OPT has to be in line with your degree. So if you don't get into medical school, you may end up running into issues if your major is like in dance or something else. So just take that into consideration. All right, so MCAT. At least everybody should have heard about the MCAT. So this is I guess if you're applying to college, you have an SAT. But then the MCAT is when you have an exam that every person who's applying into medicine has to take. So you can Google it, but then there are a lot of subjects that require the basic pre-med requirements that I mentioned. And once you take it, I think you have 3 times, you can take it up to 3 times in a year or 7 times in a lifetime, something like that. But then the best time you should take it, if you are planning on going straight through, which means right after you finish undergraduate and you start medicine, like I did, you have to take it in your junior year, like close to the end of the junior year, more so like in April or May, so that you have the results by June when the application starts. Okay, and then in terms of how to do well, really, you have to do questions. Do the Q banks. Do as many questions as you possibly can. You can't afford not to just say, oh, I know the theory, I'll be fine. This is a hard exam. Everyone knows it's hard. So please prepare by doing as many questions as you can. In terms of the resources, I don't get any compensation from them, but I used exam crackers during the time. It was relatively affordable, and I found it pretty useful. Some people go with the Kaplan. They can do the Kaplan. I think they have like a course that you attend, and they found it helpful. But I was low budget. I didn't want to use this. I didn't have as much money to begin with, so I just went with do it yourself studying. If you need a tutor, that can be helpful too. Some people find that useful. And then I think the MCAT costs about $320. So it's not a cheap exam. You just have to be cognizant of that fact. Okay, so I know a lot of people will be having questions and stuff, but I will address most of the questions at the end so that we keep to the flow of the conversation. But just keep on, you can type in the questions, I'll see them at the end. Okay. And then, let's see, how to stand out. So this is important because you're coming into a system where it's hard for Americans to get into medical school. Now you're an international student on a visa, and you also need to stand out. So what are some of the unique things that you as an international student can bring to the table? That's what you always have to think at the back of your mind. How can you stand apart from the Americans, right? Because they're very good too, so you have to be better. That's the thing. So one of the things that can help you to stand out is leadership and service. So when you're in college, like right at the beginning, start planning. What are some of the activities that you'll be doing to set yourself apart? So in my case, I did quite a lot of things when I was in college. So I started volunteering at a soup kitchen in Oberlin, and then I served on the board of directors for that soup kitchen, and that was a great experience. And over the summer breaks, over the fall breaks and spring breaks, I would organize community service projects. Like I would go to different organizations in our community and ask them, "Oh, do you need volunteers?" And I would organize that. And sometimes during the winter breaks, I would do a project. Like I went to Zimbabwe and taught entrepreneurship to local university students. At another point, I went to Malaysia and I volunteered at an AIDS hospice. That was kind of like really stretching it, but it was an amazing experience and I can never trade it for anything. And sometimes you just have to figure out, you have to be proactive, think outside the box. Some people have started nonprofits, businesses, although you have to do it within the confines of your visa. So just think about that. But you also have an incredible resource because you have your global experience. You're coming from different countries, and with varying level of commitment, you can be able to do projects in your country. So it doesn't have like over the summer breaks, and they can be amazing experiences because you have a network that most Americans don't have, which is in your home country. So you utilize that. Do an internship, organize something. Please just do something that's meaningful, and you will most likely be able to succeed. It won't cut it to just have good grades. You can have a 4.0 and still not get in. So that doesn't cut it. So you just try to find something that is meaningful and impactful, and just go all out. So that's where the impact of over involvement. So if you're like presidents of clubs and anything that you can do to make sure that you're standing out. And in terms of experiences, one of the things that I found to be very helpful is research, because most people, when you're applying, in medicine, for instance, there is a lot of push towards creating new knowledge and helping to advance the frontier of science. So you need to have at least some research experience on your resume. But then I came from a small liberal arts college, and there was not high-powered research there. So I just did what I could. But now, especially for nowadays, there are a lot of medical schools that offer summer internships where you can do research, at least more higher-powered research, and take advantage of that. You can use your CPT if need be, to be able to do your research, say at Harvard or Stanford or Yale, for their undergraduate and pre-med curriculums, and that will be very helpful for your application. And then apply to as many conferences. So there are pre-med conferences. There's one, I think, the New England Symposium that's Harvard hosts. They bring in pre-meds. Do that, and then give it your best so that you submit your abstracts and your conferences. Apply to be an oral presenter, because the more awards that you get, the more likely your application is going to stand out. So apply to as many conferences, do as much like presenting your abstracts as well as the imposters, so that you come up with get as many awards as you can. Okay. So one of the things that people have been asking me is, "Oh, Emmanuel, so COVID is with us, and how's that going to affect the application cycle?" The truth is, Obviously, I don't know, and this is uncharted territories for everybody. But then you also need to have the clinical experience. I mean, it's difficult to say you want to become a doctor when you don't even know what doctors do. It's tough for the admissions committee to say, even for your own edification, it's just good to know what physicians do on a day-to-day basis. And let's just assume that COVID is under control and we don't have to worry too much. So how would you be able to get that shadowing? Sometimes colleges have alumni who are physicians who are willing to host other students as shadowing mentees, I guess you could call that. And that can be very helpful too, because that's what I did. Like I had a pediatrician in my community. He actually started medical school when he was 50. And I just went and I shadowed him and got to learn from him. And also managed to get credit from my school to be able to shadow. And so that it counted towards my graduation requirements. So that was great. But if you don't know anybody, go on WebMD. There are all these directories. You can just find somebody who you can shadow, because it's important to be able to just do that. As I was mentioned with the COVID, I'm not sure, but once everything goes to status quo, it's important that you be able to do that. Okay, so, and as I was mentioning, just in summary, just do as much as you can. But I know it's difficult as an international student, because sometimes you have home requirements, like maybe you need to send money back home, maybe somebody passes away at home, and you are far away. It's just a hassle. But there are no excuses. You just have to do what you have to do. Okay. And then, because sometimes people find it difficult, maybe you're working in the cafeteria, or you're cleaning the pots after dinner, and now you also need to do all these extracurricular activities to make your activities stand out. So I understand I'm not just saying things randomly, but you just have to figure out a way that works. And just coming back, maybe I digress, but just to make sure that you appreciate the importance of extracurriculars. Don't wait until you're in your junior year or senior year to start doing things. Start as early as possible. Network as much as you can. And because through networking, you get to have meaningful conversations with other people. You also just get to become a better person, because by volunteering, you meet Americans who are either for more walks of life. Like in the soup kitchen that I worked, it was just a great experience. Also tutored students who were doing like for a GED, and that was also a great experience. And some of the things that I did were just activities that I sought because I found meaning in them. When you're studying and you're very tired, but when you get to help other people, it makes a difference. And you also get to appreciate that there's more to life than just books, and medicine is just part of the journey. Okay, so let me just take a quick step and see what most people. Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I think it's important for me to just get a rough idea of what people are saying. But that being said, and people are asking me about some of the activities that I did, and very few of them were actually related to medicine per se, because it's difficult. We only had like a small community hospital at Oberlin, and it was difficult to get a placement there for me to say I had meaningful clinical experiences. But then the things that I did out of the was to just make sure that I worked hard at getting other experiences outside of just medicine. So I worked with like different nonprofits. That was helpful. And sometimes I served as an RA, like a resident assistant, and that was also helpful because you learn the people skills, you learn how to lead projects, you do like all those activities for students, and that was something that came up in my interview. And I think one other thing that I actually thought was important was my activities outside of school, because I studied biochemistry, but by the time when I applied, I was also studying Chinese and East Asian studies. And that was also a big turning point. Like, oh, there's an African who's speaking Chinese. Like, oh, okay, that's unique. So that helped me stand out in some way. So I was involved in the Vietnamese Students Association. I was involved in the Chinese Students Association. And, it showed me as my own experience being abroad and then learning a different culture when you are there. That also was very helpful. So by just stepping outside of your comfort zone, you'll be able to get experiences that will help you to stand out. So that's what you're trying to also do. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So the application process. Now that you have managed to get all these other things ready, it's important now to think about the whole process as a whole. And it's a long process. I told you, when should you start preparing? I would say start preparing like yesterday or today. If you're in high school, start preparing. Well, I guess when you start. But the earlier you start the preparation, the better. Okay. So in your freshman, my recommendation will be to do all your prerequisites. So this means the first year of general chemistry, then organic chemistry maybe in your second year, but then do your biology, your physics, and start the extracurriculars. Guys, you have to have something that distinguishes you, but crash the prerequisites. Do extremely well. So study. Go to office hours. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that the prerequisites, you get as close to a 4.0 or at least a 3.9 in your science prerequisites for the MCAT, for the admissions, because those will be very important because you're being judged by your science background. Even if you choose to do others majors like dance or whatever you choose to do, but those prerequisites you really have to do very well on them. Okay. And then the other things are like I talked about the extracurricular. So that's your freshman year, and then your sophomore, continue to do like the year after freshman to sophomore, you can do maybe research, or you can. That's what I did at Oberlin. So I just did the whole summer just doing research. And that was very helpful. So, but if you can apply for one of those programs that are done at major universities, that can also be helpful. But just make sure that you are on track to doing something. Don't wake up when you're in your fourth year and say, oh gosh, I think I need to do medicine, because that will be a longer path, especially if you're on a visa, because now you have to think about how will you be able to stay in the country after that. Okay. And then in your junior year, that's what I talked about the MCAT. But another thing that's very important are recommendations, because you need people to be able to vouch for you. They have to say, yes, Emmanuel is a great guy. He just didn't get an A in biology. I don't know. You have to go to the office hours. Make sure that the professor knows you personally. Not just like divulging all the kinds of information, but really you have a personal relationship with your professors. At least when you're starting off in your freshman year, kind of start thinking about which people you'd want to write your recommendations at the end of your before you start applying, because it's not just gonna cut it to say he got an A and that's okay. Okay, so just make sure you get all your ducks in a row. So which means, like I would go to office hours, even if there was a project. Like people will end up writing my recommendation. Like I did research with them. If it was my Chinese professor wrote me a great recommendation, and I was involved with activities like planning and doing other things outside of my comfort zone, and they appreciated that. So please just think about these things like early on. The earlier you do, the better, because they'll serve you as you go on, and try to make sure that you're very professional. I know it's tough. Let me just take a moment at this, because I know it's tough, especially when you come from different educational systems. Let me give an example. When I was in Zimbabwe, it was kind of frowned upon to just always raise your hand. So most people would not raise their hand in class, even if you knew the answer. But then here, that doesn't work. If you know it, say it. Step out of your comfort zone. Be involved in the group discussions. Submit your work on time. All those things, they add up. Because as time goes on, you need to be able to do that. Even as a physician, you need to be also on top of your things. So that's another thing that I'll need you to make sure that you're always on top of. And then the personal statement. This is very important, because imagine you're trying to summarize your whole life onto one page. So don't just write willy-nilly. And please, for me, it took me weeks to write my personal statement, because I'd write it, then I'll rewrite it, then I'll draft it, then I'll erase all of it, then I'll write a new one, and then people will criticize it, and then so it took me a long time to be able to come up with the personal statement, because it has to be perfect. No errors. Someone has to read it and say, I know this guy. I think I want him on our team, in my class. Okay, so take as much effort as you can to write a personal statement that is meaningful. It has to show where you're coming from, where you are now, and where you're going. That's how I look at it. It has to be something that is spot on, within the confines of the limits of how many letters you're supposed to have in that. So there's a word limit. That's basically what I'm saying. And then the sum after your junior year, which is more like April, May, June. So you submit your application as early as possible. So I think they usually open around June 1st, the first week of June. Make sure you have your stuff in by then. If not, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But most of the schools are rolling, which means the earlier applications get considered first than the later, and they have limited number of spots. So the earlier you submit your items, the better. And it's important that even when you submit your AMCAS, you verify everything. You go through all the application stuff, the extracurriculars that you put in, there are no errors, like no spelling mistakes, the grammar is okay, is good, is great. Because even English may be your first language, but really, it has to be perfect. You can't afford to mess up after you've worked so hard up to this point. You just have to make sure that you have everything ready. And then there's also the secondary applications. So this, after you finish, you will notice that schools start to send you, or if you pass the first stage, then after you submit your AMCAS application, then they will invite you to submit secondary applications. And these are extra prompts, like, an ethical situation that you dealt with, or how do you deal with adversity? How do you contribute to diversity in the school? So each school may have their separate secondary application, and it is important to take those seriously and to return them in a timely fashion. Maybe like a week or two turnaround time. Because the earlier you submit it, also the better, because as I mentioned, it's a rolling admission. Take them seriously, and it has to be about that school. Don't write about just copy and paste what you wrote for another school, but you do some research and make sure that everything is on point. Okay, and then which schools are international friendly? I get this question a lot, because you can't. I know I'm being recorded, but really, the most important way you can do well in this is to aim for the top schools. I knew when I was applying that if I didn't get into Harvard or the big schools, then I'll be toast, because most of them don't even accept international students, or they don't offer any funding. They just reserve for Americans. So I just had to aim high and just hope for the best. Just give it your all. So the ones I know, international students where they've attended, Harvard, of course, there were 3 Zimbabweans graduating in my year, and there are several others. But then Yale also has a lot of international students. I know some people at Columbia, some people got into Stanford. Duke also accepted one guy with a full scholarship, was international. So, and Cleveland Clinic also had some international students, which means, these are top schools. Americans really want to also get into those schools. So you just have to do whatever you have to do to be able to get in. Okay. And then in your senior year, that's when you start to do interviews and then the rolling acceptances as they come in. All right, let me just make sure. Okay, so we're pretty good on time so that I'll be able to take most of your questions. And then for the interviews, this is important. This is like very, very important. I don't know how the COVID situation will change from in-person to virtual, but when I did them, they were obviously in person, and you had to fly all over the country, and it was a lot of expense. It was a lot of expense. Imagine you're trying to scrap by, and yeah, it was messy. But maybe now with virtual interviews, you may be able to save some money that way. So just be prepared. But what type of questions do they ask? Well, anything on your application is fair game. Like literally anything. Anything that you put your word on your application, that's fair game. So please put only things, don't over-represent yourself, don't lie, be professional. But just like they can ask, tell me of an ethical situation that you dealt with. They can be behavioral questions. And by that I mean they'll give you a scenario. How will you act and how will you perform if you do this? And so they can throw any curveballs at you. Obviously, I can help out with that as time goes on. But just do as much research as you can to make sure that you are prepared for the interview. Have mock interviews. Because to find someone, I can help with that. Find someone who can ask you these tough questions in a non-judgmental way, and then be able to give you feedback and say, oh, maybe you should phrase it this way or that way. Another thing that also helps is to record yourself, because you really be amazed at how much you are more self-critical when you hear yourself in a recording. Sometimes it's not as great as it sounds, but yeah, just do as much preparation as you can, because this is their last step. Okay, not everyone gets an interview. Maybe I know at Harvard when I applied, it was mostly when they interviewed, I'm not sure, is it like 10% or 5 or 10% of the people that applied? So it was, for you to get the interview, you can't afford to just mess it up when you get there. So just be prepared. Okay, and then after every interview, please send a thank you note, just common courtesy. Send a thank you note to everyone, take quick notes, and that'll be very helpful as you go on. Okay, and then the $1 million question: funding. Like, as an international student, how will I be able to pay for all this? Even if I get in, how will I be able to pay for the medical education? It's very expensive. My school was $72,000 a year, which came down to about 300 and something thousand for the whole degree. But then the way I approached it is, I knew schools that had accepted international students, and a lot of them now offer need-based aid for international students. So for me, I got in need-based aid as well as a merit scholarship, and that was very helpful, because when your household income was under 120,000, you'd be eligible for the need-based aid, everyone. So Harvard didn't discriminate against internationals or Americans. The only thing is I got what they called institutional loans, which are loans that I didn't need a co-signer, basically. I could sign them against my own name. And that was important for me because I didn't want to have someone else tied to my debt. Another thing is, maybe now it's different. I would say differently. So it's very difficult to get away with a medical degree and not have any loans, unless of course your parents are like filthy rich and you come from a great family. You can get a full scholarship, that's rare, but then everyone takes loans. Like I had to take, when I was in med school, I think it was because everyone who was on need base had to take at least 25,000 a year, which is like 100,000. But I also got a merit scholarship that offset that. But everyone has to graduate with loans. So most people, let me give that caveat. But at Harvard, I think the average student at that time when I graduated with like $115,000 in loans that they had to pay off. So it's expensive. So just think about that. But I think it's worth it. Like I showed you the combat sessions that physicians get, and I mean you can knock it off if you're responsible. and that'll be fine. It's the price that you pay, basically. But other people, if you know that because most schools that don't accept international students, they say, well, you need to put this money in an escrowing account, like the whole tuition, which is like 320,000, and you need to fork out the money and then put it into an account. I knew I wouldn't be able to do that. That was just a non-starter. So that's why I applied to schools that I knew would accept international students. And then 2, give me need-based aid. And then 3, I didn't need a cosigner. So that was helpful for me. If you know that, if you have someone who's a relative or someone who's close to you who would be able to cosign your loans, give them a heads up, because that can be helpful. I know people who had other people co-sign their loans, but it's difficult to task an American who you don't have a strong relationship with to sign off on your loans, because this is a lot of money. As I told you, I think the average in the country is like $150,000 for every graduating student, medical student. So that's a lot of money. Just be cognizant of that. And I thought I'd take us a little bit of time on this, because really that's a big hurdle that us as international students, because you don't have access to the federal funding, like the Stafford or the whatever loans that they give to permanent residents in America. So just think about that. All right. And then strategy. So I could talk, a lot about strategy, but I think the most important thing is I just came up with a couple of things that would be important. So remember, it's a marathon. It's not a journey where it's not a destination, basically. It's a marathon. It's like a race. As I mentioned, I graduated high school in 2005, and I'm still in training. So if it's about the money, there are many ways you can get money. You can go into other fields and still be fine. But then for me, I knew I wanted to become a doctor, and I knew I wanted to help in many ways than I just can. And I loved learning about the science. I love learning about medicine, and I just enjoy being a doctor. It's something that I really wake up every day and say, oh, wow, this is great. Like I go and I read scans, like CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually contributing to patient care. That means that has meaning for me. So yeah, what I'm just saying is it's a marathon. Don't expect that, you just see yourself wearing that white coat and it's gonna be great. But as I was mentioning, if you can get anything out of this, it's a journey. So reserve your energy, run slow, but be meticulous and begin with the end in mind. Know that one day it's gonna be great. It's gonna happen, but just don't think that it's gonna happen overnight. Just do your best, okay? And the other thing is, know you have an international advantage. So unlike other Americans, Americans, a lot of them, of course, I'm giving generalizations, but there's a big move towards global health and really helping the underserved. So as an international student, you come from different backgrounds. Obviously, if you're coming from a country that's well off, that's different. Or if you come from Zimbabwe, you have a lot to talk about. But that's neither here nor there. So where I'm going with this is use your background, use your community back home, be involved at an international scale. Like by international, I mean your own country. That counts as international experience. So try to use that to your advantage, and because most people don't have access to that. So when you're applying, you may come across as if, you're actually active in your home country. And now there are scholarships or funds like the Davis projects. They used to give funding. I don't know if they still do, but they would give funding to projects if you're doing it abroad. They give you $10,000 to go into a community service project. Do that. Or if you are interested in, say, coding, go teach kids from a high school how to code. Do something that is involved in your home country, because that will also help you to stand out, especially during the summers if you manage to go home. And then balance is crucial. This is a marathon. You can't, mental health is also important, because it can easily burn out. Have somebody that you can confide in, and know that it's okay if it doesn't work out. But just give it your best. It's better to say, I tried, I gave it my best and I failed, rather than, and to accept that. But to say you didn't give it your best, that's not gonna work. So just try to if you need counseling, that's important too. Just do whatever you need to do so that you are mentally prepared. Because sometimes people get into rough times. Like let's say your parent passes away and you're abroad and you can't go home and it's like a mess. Just take a step back. It's okay. It's gonna be fine. Just do whatever you have to do in order to succeed on your goal. And as I mentioned, find your why. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? It's very important. Like, why are you doing this? Is it because your parents want you to become a doctor? That's not gonna cut it, because it's you easily burn out. Is it because you want to get a high salary, but really there are so many other jobs that can give you high salaries, and you don't have to go to medical school? So I can give you my example. Like my why is, as I mentioned, I enjoy radiology. I knew when I worked with a mentor in medical school as a radiologist, and he did a lot of global health work. He would read x-rays from Cambodia and Uganda. And I just found that very fascinating. Like you can use technology to make an impact in patient care around the world. So that for me was something that I found very interesting. So of course, I'm talking about this now after, because I'd already gone into medical school. But before I got into medical school, I just knew I knew this is what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else, but this is what I wanted to do. And people would say, Manuel, it's impossible to do that, but I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And a lot of you are like that. So just don't give up early, but just find your why and just make sure your heart is in the right place, and you'll be fine. And then the other thing is find mentorship, because it's important to have a mentor. Because when you have a mentor, someone who is ahead of you or who has gone through the process and is able to guide you along the way, that tends to be very helpful. And networking. But remember, people are busy, so you can't expect everybody who you reach out to say, "Oh yeah, I'll help you." Because remember, it's really tough. Everyone is very busy with busy schedules. But even if it's paid, just do whatever you have to do in order to achieve your goals. And then finally, you have to stay hungry. You have to want this so bad. And just do what you have to do to succeed. But remember, it's important to have integrity, be professional. So professionalism is one of the key pillars in being a physician. And know that in everything that you're doing, so you're always being watched, right? Don't go into run-ins with the law. Don't get drunk when you're in college and get, the police comes and then they give you a citation. That also jeopardizes your visa and your medical school application. So just be a good citizen and do the right thing. Okay? Let me make sure. So I wanted to leave at least 15 minutes to address questions. So we are like 2 minutes. It's almost 1:43. So the thing the things that I can help out with is sort of the next steps. So you can always feel free to reach out to me. Like I can help out with like pre-med planning. You come up with a plan that if you're starting out or whatever stage you are in, like how can we have a personalized approach towards your pre-med journey? Because as I was mentioning, it's important to have a plan. And if you need me to come in and help you with that plan, you just reach out. And extracurricular activity strategies. As I was mentioning, it's very important to have extracurriculars, but don't just do any random extracurricular. It needs to be something that will help you in your cause, to say, hey, I have these experiences and they're in line with my desire to become a physician, that I've learned X, Y, and Z. And if you need help with editing a personal statement, as I mentioned, I find it took weeks to be able to write it and make it perfect. Maybe you need help with brainstorming, or maybe it's application, AMCAS application, just like editing it and make sure there are no typos, or even just you need an interview prep, like mock interviews, and help with that. That's something that I will be able to assist with. And then I just want to acknowledge my wife, obviously, Amanda. She's been very supportive throughout this whole journey. And Alison Elwanga, who is somebody who I've got to know quite a bit, and she helped in a lot of the research that I've gotten to share during this conversation. Okay, so I'll open it. Yeah, it's now probably now time for me to take questions. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand in the chat, and then I'll be taking questions as they come. Okay. All right. So just bear with me. If you have any questions, so just type it in the chat, because there are a lot of people, and it's difficult for me to say for people to actually ask questions with audio. Okay. So will it hurt to include extracurriculars involving religious groups? Is it taboo? Not at all. I mean, you can be involved in your church, in your mosque, in your synagogue, whatever you're involved with. It just should be with meaning, though. So just make sure that what you're doing is in line with your goal to become a physician. So for instance, some churches have community projects that they do. Be involved in that. And going to being in a religious group, it can also help you to be grounded, because your faith is very important. If you pray, believe that God will help you in your journey. It keeps you grounded. Okay. And then, does prestige lose? Gomez also asked, does prestige of your undergrad school matter? I mean, to some extent, but it really doesn't. If you're top in your undergraduate and elsewhere, you will be fine. Just do your best. Okay, don't worry about the prestige of the undergrad, because obviously people who go to schools that already have a big med school, they have an upper hand. But don't worry about that. Just do what you can. Okay. Because sometimes we end up being worried, like, oh, I just need to go into Harvard if I'm going to go to med school. I mean, it helps, but just do the best wherever you are. Okay. And then, which other site did you mention we could use for studying MCAT besides Kaplan? So I used Exam Crackers, but there are also others like the Khan Academy, Coursera. Those can be very helpful too. Just depends on your budget. Okay. And then the personal statement, John Ejiogu asks, is it only one page? It depends. Sometimes I think they have a limit. I'm not sure how many words. It's like characters that you're supposed to do. And just do the best that you can to make sure that you have the limit that's appropriate. And then any benefits of studying abroad? I mean, you're abroad, then you go abroad. It just depends on what experiences you're gonna bring to the table. If you want to go abroad, I mean, it's great, but just make sure that you're getting as much experience that will be aligned with your med school strategy. Okay. And then I was wondering, when you decided to pursue medicine, why you chose the US route for medicine. If you're thinking about this since high school. That's a very good question that Sai asked. Because when I was in high school, I thought, oh, I could just go to the University of Zimbabwe, and then in 5 years I'll be a doctor, and I'll be great. But then, I mean, obviously there were push factors as well. But when I came here, I was so determined that this is what I wanted to do. So I always liked biology and chemistry. I did A-level in biology, chemistry, and mathematics, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Uncle was a physician, and I always used to be inspired by him. But I knew it for myself that this is what I wanted to do. So I just chose the US, and even when people told me it's impossible, I just gave it my all. And that's where I am. Okay. And then, is there any advantage to being a non-traditional pre-med student, like majoring in mathematics instead of bio? Like, as I mentioned, it doesn't really matter what you study, as long as you get that GPA high. Really, think about it. If you want to go and do, I don't know, like a hard major, if you're great in mathematics, do very well in mathematics. Just shine wherever you are. It's gonna be great. Okay. As long as you do something that you're great at, then you get a good GPA. Because remember, you're also doing those extracurricular activities, right? So those take out time that you need to carve out. So if you're struggling in your classes, then you want to do extracurriculars, just a recipe for disaster. So just do what you can to make sure you take a major that you'll be graded and that you'll be able to succeed. That's my recommendation. I won't say do biology or do chemistry or do philosophy. That's not the end of the day. If you're good in something, just do that. And then Michael Moyo asks, what is a bad GPA or GPA range? Also, what's a good MCAT score? I think the MCAT score, you can Google this, but the GPA, as I mentioned, like with NYU, was a 3.96. But then the range came from 3.47 to 4.0. MCAT, I think the 90th percentile was like, I'm not sure if it's 514 or 520, somewhere there. And something that you can always Google. And you need to be at the top. Like when I applied for my MCAT, I think I was there's the old MCAT, so not this one. So it was like in the 94th percentile, which was because I just had to do well on it. But as I mentioned, I do as many questions as you can. That was the strategy that I used, and it was successful. Okay. All right, let me keep going. Are the GPAs weighted differently for different schools? For example, UC's GPA weighted more than other community colleges. That's a good question that Sujit asks, because with GPAs, like different classes have different credits have different GPA weightings. So if you take a 1 credit class and you get an A, it's different than if you take a 5 credit class and get an A. Because overall, a 5 credit class that you, like in a language, like in my case, when I took Chinese, it was 5 credits. Right? When I got an A in that class and then got a B in a 1 credit class, my GPA would still be very high. Compared to if you get a A in a 1 credit class and get a C in a 5 credit class, then it's not going to work out well for you. The word had to include extracurriculars involvement. Okay, I took that. And then prestige, it doesn't matter. All right, let's see. All right. All right. So another question about shadowing, like shadowing in the home country. Yeah, I think that I'm not sure, because really you want to also get US experiences, like shadowing in your hometown, in your home country. So you want to have US experience. It's difficult for you to justify how, like, oh, I want to become a doctor in Zimbabwe. I mean in the US, but I only have experiences in Zimbabwe. You also need to know how the US healthcare system works, okay? And then you said top med school you said internship in top med school in summer is a great activity. Do you know what requirements they do require to get accepted? So usually they require like a recommendation letter from one of your professors, and then there's a personal statement. You can read that's Dengwen who was asking that. You can really just look at the different programs and they'll be able to be helpful. Okay. All right. How many schools did you apply and how many did you get accepted from? That's a good question, because when I applied, how do I put it? So I think I applied to 6 schools, which is really low. But I only applied to the 6 schools that I knew were very competitive. And because for me, my criteria was, it doesn't help me to get accepted into a school that I won't be able to attend, right? Because if I get accepted to University of St. Elsewhere and they don't accept internet and they don't have any need-based aid, it's not going to help me. So I only applied to schools that I knew had accepted international students in the past and that had given them aid to be able to attend them. So in my case, I applied to Harvard, to Yale, to Duke, and I got into those. And then I also applied to Mayo Clinic. I think they had a wait list. And then I applied to Vanderbilt, I got in. And then the last one was UPenn. I think they just didn't accept international students that year. So there you have it. Okay, and then let's see. Okay, so this Vimbai Nashe Munyanduke asks, could someone get financial assistance for the MCAT, and which organization can offer that assistance? So this is tough because as an international student, you are kind of excluded from the financial assistance. But then if you are a permanent resident or an asylum applicant, yeah, you can be able to get assistance, but not as an F1 student. And then how did you finance your med school? I still have loans that I'm paying. I mean, I told you, you can't run away from that. But I got need-based aid, a merit scholarship, and loans. So I'm still paying off my loans. And can you take internships at a company when you're a freshman? So I'm not sure about the freshman because you have to be in the US for this 1 year to be able to be eligible for CPT. But you can then use CPT for your summer and going forward. So just talk to your advisor for that, like the international student advisor. And then talked about the GPA. Can I now done what should do for a gap year? So I didn't talk about a gap year because my experience was I went straight through to when I came in. So I didn't, that was my plan. Like I just wanted to get over and done with. But if you have a gap year, we can talk offline and we can figure out, something different. And then how were you able to afford your living expenses? Did you have a part-time job? Is it advisable to work? How much, that's Alfreda Vera. So the thing is, if you ask me about this in med school, then I can answer that because for the loans it was mostly just living expenses. That's why I was taking those loans. And Boston is very expensive, right? So I took the loans and so they'll give me a stipend every month, even though I knew it was like a loan, but whatever. It was helpful for me. So I didn't have to take a part-time job. It's difficult to take a part-time job in med school because you're already very busy to begin with. All right, let me make sure I'm cognizant of our time. All right, so we have 4 more minutes. Okay. Let's see. All right. We talked about financial aid. Okay, this is important, financial aid. So the most important thing is get into the school and then figure it out. Because like the top schools, the policies are changing. It's like some schools are becoming tuition free, but remember, even if it's tuition free, you'll need to borrow maybe for living expenses. So there's that too. But then financial aid, they also, the same way that they have financial aid for undergraduate, they also have financial aid for med students. So just think about that, okay? So it's an option. Don't worry about it too much. Focus on get your application ready, do the best that you can, and you'll be fine. As long as you have everything ready. If you need to pray, have faith. Just do you and make sure that you'll be okay. So financial aid, there are definitely options for. I actually know one guy who got a full scholarship to go to Duke. So there you have it. So okay, this is good. Dumisile Mpamba asks, do you have advice for financing med school application process expenses? This is very tough. I mean, guys, for me it was very expensive because even though I applied to few schools, the secondaries can cost anywhere from $20 to $100. This is after you pay for the AMCAS. Like each school, they have a limit. Like I think if you apply for the first 10 schools are X amount, and then the following schools are X amount. So it's a very expensive process. Just start saving early. That's what I'm gonna say. And maybe now with the virtual interview is gonna be helpful. But then if they go in person, these are flights that you need to be buying on a short notice, and it can be expensive. Okay. All right. Do you suggest abroad for Premeds? Okay, great. So Minia asks, is it hard to get residence as an international medical student? So that's different. So I think I'll answer this. Maybe it's different, but I'll answer this. Like when you become like on an F1, like I was on an F1 when I was at Harvard, right? When I was applying to residency, I was treated like an American, which is great. So you are like, let's say if there's a person who's from the University of Zimbabwe who graduated medicine there, and then me, and we're both Zimbabwean citizens. But when I'm applying for residence, I'm considered like an American. And I have a lot more opportunities. I can apply for neurosurgery. I can apply for, crazy competitive residencies. I can still be fine because I have I have in the US medical education. Okay. I applied for radiology because that's why I wanted to do it. It was competitive, but I love it. Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, thank you someone said appreciate. You suggest, let's see, how many schools did you apply to? I asked that. Do you feel, if you feel one area of application is weak and great all around, with great grades and recommendations, but little shadowing or lower GPA, but strong MCAT and research, would you still encourage such an application to apply, fix the weak areas, or apply later? So this like Kim Bennett asked that. This really depends on, I think it's a personalized situation. We can always talk offline and come up with a plan that works for each individual, but it's difficult to give like a concrete answer when every individual will be different. Okay. What's your take on gap years? Do you think they're advisable? I know people have taken gap years and they're fine. It just depends on what your desire is and if you can do well. Because for instance, I know one person who took a gap year, worked in Wall Street, and then is an international student, used OPT, yeah, and then applied to med school. But she'd always been pre-med, and she chickened out later on, and then she decided, okay, I wanted to go back to med school, and she was fine. So that's gap years can be okay. And I know people have done research in doing gap years to beef up their research experiences, like working as a technologist, as a research tech, and they still be fine. Okay. I see that most schools say applicants have to be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident. How can one still with visa status STEM OPT? I'm not sure what John Bob means, but basically, if maybe the question is, most people to answer this, most schools they want people to be U.S. citizens or permanent residents, like most applicants, right? That's what I was saying. It's difficult as an international student because a lot of these other medical schools they won't even look at your application if you're an international student, right? So it makes it tough for us. But then the ones that I mentioned, like the top schools, they will still look at your application. As long as you made the cut, you'll be fine. So don't focus on the schools that don't give you access, but just focus on the ones that will enable you to be accepted, okay? And then other alternatives, okay, shadowing in the pandemic, I'm not sure, it's difficult. All right, so can you talk a bit about the AIDS program you worked with in Malaysia, please? Really interested about that, Imal. I can talk about this even offline, but I got grants from my school to be able to work with, because I told them I'm interested in HIV. We have a lot of HIV issues in Zimbabwe, and one of the countries that I know that's been doing very well is Malaysia. I mean, their rate was like really, really low, but it's like a developing country. And I came up with a project. I submitted it for multiple committees. They approved my funding, and then I contacted some organizations there. And it was tough as an outsider to be able to do that, but I just pulled through, stayed with a friend who was originally from Malaysia at their house, and just gave it my all, and it was an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So that was great. And the BSMD pathway, I'm not sure because usually I can't comment on that, unfortunately, because I'm not too sure. Do you recommend taking MCAT after sophomore year? Yeah, I recommend taking an MCAT after in your junior year, basically. Not after your junior, but during your end of your junior year. That way you've taken most of the prerequisites and you're now ready. Okay. All right, I think our time is almost up. It's like we're a little bit over. So I think I'll end the webinar now, but then let's see. All right, thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. All right, so I think I will end now, but thank you so much to everybody who has been here. But I guess what I can do is I'll stop the recording, and then I could talk. I could answer some of the questions for anybody who wants to stay. That way, sometimes somebody has a question and somebody else has the same question, and it would be helpful if I just spend a few more minutes to answer those. So I'll stop the recording, and then I'll continue to answer questions. Okay.